with that. So the reason why we have the tank strapped to the cart is because here there's a dark spot, which is a submerged gas chamber that's not connected to the tank. And what was happening is the implosion was so hard, it was picking up 20 gallons of water, which is about 8 pounds a gallon. That's about 160 pounds. And then we put 100-pound weights on either side of the cart, because it's like a vacuum cleaner. It's like we're sticking a vacuum cleaner down into the tank, and then we ignite it with a Tesla coil, and it vacuums up all the water, and it ignites some of the water. And this was a way of processing dirty water, structuring it, resetting it, all those things more on an industrial level. So right now you're seeing before anything happens, and you're looking at the tank, and it's kind of hard to see because it's, dark. You'll see more of it in the light. And on the bottom of this picture, what happens first, which is what you see with lightning, is before lightning strikes, there's hundreds of small ticklers that look like trees with no leaves growing out of the ground. And then this is the same way fungus grows too. So there's kind of nice synonymous observations in nature. And the lightning goes out and comes back, and goes out and comes back, almost like it's getting close to the ground and testing, and then going back and telling everybody else in the chain of events with the lightning where to go. So it's looking to balance out the earth. So the sky and the earth are looking to balance each other, and that's kind of what a storm and lightning is. And so the first thing you see normally before a lightning strike is small streamers coming from the ground, and hundreds of them. It's quite a cool phenomena. I recommend going and looking it up on YouTube. If you type in step leader, it'll give you the videos. And so what you're seeing here is a more in-depth view of what the water is in this equation in its full cycle. And on the bottom here, where my pointer is, you see a little bit of blue. It's very clear when you really take a good look at it, but you guys might be a little faint because of the resolution here. But there's a little ultraviolet coming off the concrete underneath the tank. And we know it wasn't a reflection because we had a board underneath the cart, so there was no light coming from the top through the board. So that's the first thing that happens, is energy comes out of the ground, and then energy comes out of the gas. And that hat-looking thing there is basically the vacuum chamber where the gas is. And that's how we could see the gas rotating the water. And all these speckles are glitter tracers we put in the water, and that's how we knew the water was rotating in torsion. So when you look up where the light was coming out, you see very rapidly at about 1 cycle per second, which is about the human heartbeat. And consequently, it was one of the frequencies that was placed into the water generator machine to get it to work correctly. It was a very low frequency of 1 hertz, which is the average human heartbeat, roughly 60 cycles per minute, right? 60 beats per minute, or 1 beat per second. And that's kind of a natural human heart rate. Some people are higher or lower, but it's just how the situation works. So we don't know if there's a correlation there or not. Then the next shot, 15 milliseconds later, you see unattenuated, the whole entire body of water turns yellow to white, really mostly yellow. And it's sweeping through. So the frequency of colors go from highest frequency blue to through green, then to yellow, orange, red, right? And you don't see green, and there's a whole reason for that that's beyond the scope of this topic. You can make green. Tesla talked about phosphorescent green, and going from there. I know some people have trouble with the audio, but it's your computer and your permissions. You have to learn how to use your computer, read in the chat box here, and turn your stuff on. Your security systems will block the use of your microphone with certain apps, and that's just the thing you got to work through. Mozilla is way better than Chrome. Just for a heads up there. So here we're entire ionization of the water in a very visible light perspective. And then about 10 milliseconds later, we see the water is actually being vacuumed up by the gas, imploding into a droplet. And that's what happens. You have a cloud, and then the lightning strikes, and then the cloud condenses or turns into water droplets and it rains. Only here we're doing it backwards. We're pulling rain upwards rather than letting it fall downwards because of the implosion. And that was a big thing back 11 years ago, was proving that implosion existed. So we used to put heavy weights like pounds of steel in the bottom of this container, and it would vacuum up like a spacecraft taking off. I don't have time to show all that, but basically this is how we proved implosion. And I wanted to do this for Al Throckmorton because it was very well documented. I haven't seen too many people in all my internet searches. I've never seen anybody document this in this way. It takes a pretty hefty amount of equipment to do this in this big of a fashion. And then here you see a deep, like an orange red at the finished part of the equation. So again, we're going from yellow, blue, yellow, red, orange to red. And then it finishes up with a vortex. And you can actually hear this thing. It runs for a long time. And you have to make an apparatus that you have to understand how all this works to make it work. And you have to understand resistance. And the vortex needs resistance. And so a lot of what we do is anti-resistance because we're in a state as human beings of a lot of resistance. So we counterbalance it by steering things to what they call right torsion. And as we talked about in the past webinars, that would be the blue color would be the life force accelerator. And the red would be the life force decelerator, like calcium. So if you burn calcium, you're going to get orange, red. Other things are blue. And if you look on the chemistry table, all this lines up a lot with how things burn, barring exceptions. So that's kind of what goes on with really charged up water. And that's what this is charged water. So as we structure water, we can charge it generically and we can overcharge it. And we talked about this last time. So this water, if I condense it or we condense it, more or less would be good to reconstitute in a much larger volume of water. If you drink it directly, it's just too much juice, even though it's the right juice. And we've also talked about the true definition of cancer is uncontrolled, undifferentiated cell growth, which is how things work way back in the beginning of time with single cell organisms without nucleuses and, eukaryotic cells versus nons, all the fancy language. A baby's fetus growth is identical to cancer. There's no difference whatsoever. And then, of course, there's a lot of living organisms that are precursors and bicursors or tricursors or, to cancer itself. So once the fungal or single cell rapid growth starts, the tumors, the metastasizing, the roots of the fungi networks basically is what they are. There's all sorts of bacteria and virus that come along with it. Most commonly tuberculosis, which hopefully in the future I'll have Clint Folsom on, and we can get into that. But really the fundamental causes are stressors and the cells basically getting set back. It's almost like the cells are going into a retarded mode and something is bringing this cause on, and eventually it ends up as rapid growth that needs fed and consumed, but it's just doing its job. Usually it means there's tissue that's not reforming correctly, and that can be caused by emotional problems, stressors, contamination in the body, with toxins, all the stuff that we're doing, why we do what we do ultimately for the health of the earth and the health of the people as a whole, as much as our crowd can reach. And you realize that a more healthy person can more effectively observe nature and see what's a disharmony versus a harmony. So I'm going to load up the actual presentation now, and we'll get started with that. If anybody has any time three, last word is, if it's spelled wrong, it's spelled wrong. It's infrared. You know what I mean. There is no other word, so it's a misspelling. Just give me a second here to get this other guy loaded up. And this will go pretty quick. There's not much to it. the biggest thing to understand is the difference between resetting the water to a neutral, natural level, and then what the water is going to do from there. So, water receives certain vibrations really easy and resonates with them, and other ones it kind of holds back, and they push on each other. And that could be just like magnetism. If you look at it's two pressures pushing on each other, two vacuums will suck each other together, and like seek like in that case, and opposites seek to cancel. We've talked about that a lot. The North and South Pole aren't attracted to each other as the only parameter. In the end, when they get close to each other, they actually repel each other, and that's how blood cells and the planets keep their distance, or it's attracted to the sun, all the planets, and the sun is attracted to the galactic center, but they don't really crash into each other. At some point, they hit a resonance space, which they balance out in. So that's how that goes down in an oversimplified manner. So like a general reset, right, without too much programming. This is crystallography that Veda Austin recently did. She does really beautiful work, and this is probably going to turn out to be one of the better methods, like Andrea Schultz in the crystal analysis, which is totally different than this. And this is a bit different from Emoto too, in the way she's doing it. I think she's highly improved over that. And what you can see here is when the water starts out, it's very sharp and kind of disorganized and chaotic looking. And then when you structure it and freeze it and start to look at it as it's under the microscope in layers, you see the difference in the structure. What does that mean? Well, subjectively, it means a lot. And I think you can just see by looking at the picture. I don't think it needs explained. And that's just, a dribble pour through the unit. I can tell you that's the way she poured it through there is really not advancing the water as much as it can be. The longer you pour through the unit, it's kind of making an electrical circuit in a way, a subtle electrical circuit. And so if you're filling up a gallon container, even though you're pouring that water through the gallon once, it's kind of methodology here, preface for programming and using water as a deeper protocol and using water as a healthy balancing protocol throughout the day, and what the standard portable is evolving to with the Carbon Gene series. So this is a little bit of information to allow you to use tools with the technologies you have and the people you work with and know, versus the more simple methods of whatever goes through it without a thought, right? It's not all the same. The way you pour the water through the unit has an effect on how it charges the unit. But generally, no matter how you pour the water through the unit, it does work. And so what you're seeing is, we saw this in the Pakistani test too, where they put 6 drops per minute through the unit. And I didn't know that. And I was like, these results aren't that good compared to what we see in our labs. And then I said, can you send me your protocols? And they sent me the protocol for their test. And when I saw that they were putting 6 drops a minute through the unit, I was like, whoa, you gotta pour the water through the unit. And then when they poured the water through the unit, it was 2 to 3 times more effective in their objective observational tests of growing things and watching seeds. And and even though we have right spin accelerating water, we do see pathological suppression. And generically, right spin will grow everything faster, but there's counter variables. And so that's the most important thing. There's 12 notes in music and 12 discrete steps in the universe that can be geometrically defined. And it's important to remember that just because you have one thing going on doesn't mean you don't have 6 things counteracting it. So you can't get your mind in the duopoly. You need to get your mind into what's involved in music. And how do I make music here with me as a person, as a being, and how you can make music with the water and help that out. And the more specific you get to your creative style and the water, the more effective it's going to be, in my opinion. And that's the heart of alchemy and so-called magic. Whether it's black or white, it's the same principle of organizing everything. So when you use astrology in your life, you're recognizing that the planets all resonate together and in certain geometries have certain characteristics, but by no means is it designed to predict the future. Kind of on the contrary, actually. Um, it's not a limiting factor, and that's where the duopoly always ends up. We're in a synergistic mode where how can we add, if we can add 5 things to the equation, like your average music scale in its fundamental sense is 5 notes. And how can you work with those 5 different variables to get this water to work for you in ways nothing else can? And honestly, I believe water can do things that nothing in isolation that man will create and repeat. Like anything mass produced in medicine is contrary to the fundamental laws of the universe. Not that they don't work, but the person and the receiver of the physical world controls that, and how they do it and when they do it are simple ways of creativity, right? Very like rhythm in music, how and when. How can get really complicated. But this is just a great little thing. And then Veda tested Dan Winter's technology and ours, and we know Dan's stuff works good. Dan Winter's a very intelligent guy, and explaining all this probably a little bit too deep for most people. At any rate, she melted the water and refroze it again, and you can see on the far right that the signature, whatever it held, and the really shardy looking water got better and almost started to move towards. And then you see, like, yes, of course, freezing water is integrative. You're cooling it down, and then it's radiating and expanding at the end, expressing the cycle, the frequency sweep, if you will. Short of like John Ellis's device doesn't freeze the water and melt it and reboil it, so to speak, but that does go on a small level, crystallization within the water. And we all know to this date that water forms living solid matter inside of itself at room temperature when it's alive. And that's part of what all these devices do, some more aggressive than others. So what do we mean exactly by programming? Like if we take a vortex structured water unit, spherical floor form, geometry arranged, is that programming? Not really. It's more like resetting, and it's the same thing with magnets. And magnets can actually destructure water because magnets scramble everything. It's kind of like just stirring things up as the water goes by. And we can actually see this in the crystallography. So if you take highly structured water and run it through a strong magnetic field, it destructures it. If you take really clumped up, screwed up water and put it through a magnetic field, it structures it. And again, you got to understand what side of the line you're on. Alkaline water is great for you unless your body's too alkaline. Then you are going to agitate the situation. Yeah, I don't know how you have to operate your own computer. I don't know how to do that. I don't have any trouble seeing the words in the screen. Maximize your screen, maybe. I wish I could help more with the technicalities of webinar platforms, but those are things you have to learn how to do on your own. We don't use Zoom and all those Skype for reasons, so we're on our own private platform. Back to the topic, vibrations which are coherently received. So the water changes very rapidly when that occurs, and I'm sure some of you can guess some of the vibrations that water receives. So if we just take a neutral dielectric and do water structuring through a flow form or exterior flow form like John Wilkes did 30 years ago when he started doing counter vortexes and what they originally called flow forms, and the evolution where it is today, where we concentrate it in pipes and really accelerate this process of vacuum, pressure, recombination, winding. Most people don't know this, but however many flow form stages we have is how many double vortexes are in the water. And there's different strengths of that, and some flows work better, some flows work worse. It's like music, in tune, out of tune, in tune, out of tune, just like the phi ratio. So that which is coherent with the water, which is usually going to be the lighter elements and the elements that make up the majority of the earth, and then the more exquisite, precious ones, the older elements, like the platinum group and things like that. So everybody's kind of getting on that pays attention to this, that there's certain elements, but by themselves, they usually don't do that well. So people oversteer on that and go, yeah, I got a gold container and I put water in it, and that's going to structure the water more. And it really doesn't. It puts a quality in the water, but it's kind of monotone, and water isn't really looking for that. Water is looking for more like the recipe of a dielectric or orgone accumulator, which is very similar to a rock or river rock that you would find. If you took a cross section of what's in there, you're going to see a lot of silicon and calcium, and then a lot of gold sprinkled throughout very lightly. I mean, very light. And that's how nature is really working the water in rivers. It doesn't take high concentrations of this stuff. And it's just like shungite. If you take a rock of shungite and drop it in the water, it's nowhere near as good as if you break the shungite up into little pieces and put it into a dielectric solution. And we've talked about that in past webinars, so I'm not going to, really hit it hard. And then the vibrations, which cause reconfiguration. So back in the day when we were working with water plasma industrially, and Clayton Nolte was first starting this business up, and we met, we were sharing a lot of research and co-mingling really heavy back then on all the discovery that was going on. And it was very revealing with the phi ratio and algorithms and computer-like behavior and superluminal behavior and superconducting behavior, which is kind of one and the same. And I believe these superluminal events have to be there so the universe can stay ahead of everything. We're all like stuck in this like subluminal bubble, and the idea of a bogus science, that somebody brought about that said this light has a speed limit, and it's the most ridiculous statement ever made. But there's a whole hell of a lot of them in our Newtonian physics where, yeah, half of it's right and the other half is completely wrong. So what do you have to look at to synergize the right half and stop it being from wholly wrong in the other half? And that's synergistic view. And it's like, okay, Newtonian physics works in these circumstances, but why are trees anti-gravity then? Why does lightning leave the ground? Why does hydrogen, even though it's a mass, even though it's lighter, why does it take off and go to the top? Why do people think that heat comes from the earth when it's actually a cooling process, and cold rises and heat falls? That's why it's warmer on earth and cooler up in the atmosphere. So when you change the way your mind thinks, magnets seek to cancel poles. The end result is they're seeking to cancel each other because they're under tension when they're apart. And that's what a magnetic dipole is. So if gold wants to be with gold and you split it apart, the smaller you get it, the more it aligns with the ether vibrations. So once a particle gets so small, it doesn't disrupt the flow of subtle energy. It gets in line with it. So there's a little clue about how all this works and how to differentiate between quality orgone accumulators and low ones, and high quality structured units versus low. It's all the difference in the world. It's based on less is more and synergy, not more to make it better. So we can't just generically put vibrations into the water. And let's just say you put a minor concerto by Bach, and your body doesn't want minor. It doesn't want to slow down or get deeper or sadder. It wants to get more energy and speed up. So up tempo, major harmonious would be the kind of music that would program that water correctly for you. So it's not one or the other. It's what's right, what synergizes with you. The other biggest part is science teaches us, yes, we should be neutral when we're doing analytics, but we can't lie about the goal. And if we're spending a lot of time researching, and I see the question, I'll get to it here in a second. Why would anybody spend a ton of time researching to find a null or negative result? That's just a lie. And if somebody's doing that, then we don't want them doing the research, right? We want people researching for the benefit of humanity and the earth and the synergy with the universe. We don't want them doing it. But again, we don't want people making, as a whole human collective, a bunch of BS claims and getting lazy. And you always see that in the marketplace. And the structured water community is plagued with people who have no understanding of it whatsoever, who are selling it on distorted basis, if you will, or over amplification of things that has really nothing to do with water revitalization, but is a side benefit, increased oxygen, scale, right? But if you sell the device based on taking out scale, that's not what the device is designed for. That's just what water does when it performs better. It's able to pick more up and carry it. Again, the real simple physical function of water is to carry. Nothing is toxic to water until the water becomes toxic, which means it's full, it's saturated, it can't carry anymore, it's stressed out, it's had enough. And then the water starts to take apart its environment. And there's a lot of Tom Cowan has a book, something about cancer and the new biology of water. And all the scientists are looking at the unfolding and folding of proteins, which is kind of like a virus behavior too. It's going to come down to, even though the world knows hardly anything about viruses and how they really work, other than it's all bad and your cells get screwed up. But there's way more good viruses allowing for adaptation and advancing the cellular behavior. It's never talked about because the main real estate on the internet and TV and radios is all designed to make everything fearful and negative. So it's not this is better than that. That's isolating one thing from another. It's how the two work together to get to a point, realizing that those two aren't at that point. And that's the vortex, the DNA, the double winding, the double helix. Again, the past webinars cover all the scientific evidence of electrical discharges, when and why they happen, how they happen, DNA, the double helix water under the atomic microscope, forming a double helix, on and on and on, just over the sun and plasmas that form around the sun that are most likely seeds for future planets. And the like seeking like is the subtle energy campaign. So remember that with water, and you are mostly water, and so is the earth. So all you have to do is look at it from a human perspective and the golden rule, and kind of treat water. And that is the problem, is most people don't respect themselves. So it's beyond trying to get them to actually respect the water. And then harmony and musical scale basis. We're clicking along pretty good here. Possible methods of programming, prayer and intention, and getting with the water. That's a huge one, and that's not going to work for you very well in the beginning. But if you practice for many years, it'll get better and better and better. And if you practice with technologies, it works better because it's synergizing. Music, headphones around your water glass will make binaural beats because of opposing speakers. It is a very simple way of programming water. And I'll show you some stuff that happens with different frequencies. And I've done a lot of experiments with sound, and some cooperating buddies of mine, Derek Gerlach, some of you have been introduced to him. I'd like to do a webinar with him. He does his own product, but he uses sound and light and synergizes all this stuff. But he originally started with binaural beat sound and got quite a good response out of the water. And these responses are measurable with UV spec. They show that there's a change of structure going and going on, and other ways too. So nobody's guessing at this. We're using science and response and observational. No matter what the science says, if the water doesn't do good for people in the end, then the science isn't doing us any good. But up to this point, we're getting pretty good with it. Elements are vibrations. Atoms are multitudes of vibrations. And basically some of them very much cohere with water and other ones don't, or other ones have different functions and roles. But there definitely is certain elements, and it's not hard to figure out how to identify them. And we're with the new Carbon Gene series, and even our older technology, our standard technology with the flow form, that's very much there. And sometimes we lightly talk about some of the elements that are involved, but basically the whole carbon 12 is basically the root scale of the entire atomic table. And so it's just carbon changing form, and carbon within itself most exemplifies allotropic behavior. But the whole atomic table does it That's kind of what ORMUS is about, and new elements that'll be discovered in the near future that don't exist yet. There's a whole host of semitones. Actually, a lot of the atomic table is a semitone, not an actual tone. But that goes a bit beyond the simplicity of this particular webinar. Light, you'll hear a lot of people charging with diodes. And that's getting into the programming stage at that point. And I would suggest you know what you're doing at that point. You can experiment. The IC pads and programmers use blue emitting diodes, which that's the correct general wavelength. And then they're transmitting more subscripts from there. So we see the right recipes going on, and geometry itself has a subtle effect. The geometry of a magnet, the geometry of how you arrange geometric magnets together. So geometry, the geometry of the magnet and the geometry of the group of the magnets. Now you're seeing the stacking symmetry. Superluminal and subtle energies. That's a lot of material type situations like the orgone accumulators and odic generators. And with the CG series we talked about with the odic chargers, that's what we're doing is putting all this in one place and making it more synergistic with your music. So, you know, your music will get amplified inside the Carbon Gene series in a greater way. Whereas the sound, you know, the outside of the water is always going to check what's going on. So the outer hexagonal portion of the water, which there is inner portions of hexagonal too, but the outer layer, the one Gerald Pollack's looking at, is what I would call the eggshell of the water. And the harder you hit the water, which is not a good way of making it healthy, the more and more the water is going to shell up on the outside. So you need an eggshell, but you can't be too hardened on the outside. That won't work neither. So there's a right place for all that, and there is a too much of all that, and you can really steer water into those equations. I have a lot of experience with that, and it's not healthy for you. So you can't run off with the, easy water, hexagonal water. That is structured water, and the more of it that we make, the better it is. That's completely untrue. It's a completely shallow view of what's really going on with the whole picture. But it is kind of how the mainstream markets come into it. All right, I'm going to stop here. Because basically it's vibrations and your interaction with the water. I don't care if it's in a glass coming out of your tap or if you got some complex electrical or electromagnetic charging system or a Kangen machine. Water that's put in a natural, fluent, flexible state is the best at responding to the changing environment it's going to go through, and it's always changing. But there's these root scripts, that foundations that lay on top of each other, one layer after another. That's a program. So if you clear your water out, you got a lot of layers, to go. And here's a shot of geometric magnets arranged in geometry. You really can't